bless Cindy's little heart. She's been everywhere. And I don't know where she went to now. She's around somewhere. But I'd just like to say thank you for turning up today. And I hope a lot more turn up because I have a couple of things to do and I'm going to briefly whiz home and come back again. But I'd just like to say welcome to Gweagal country. It's good to have you here. And this rally's all about the voting that's coming up. Now, I'm sitting at home watching the news every night and I've just about had enough. You know, our people are still living in third world country. You know, if you go over to Laperouse, it's miserable. Miserable. Or you go to any mission and it's miserable. It's terrible. I grew up on that mission, having to sign in and out by a white manager, and that, you know, I haven't got anything against people here today, but that's just how I have to say it. It was a sad and terrible life, but between ourselves on that mission, between our own people, we had a happy life because we had to make it happy, you know. And I just want to, it's so much I would like to tell you, you know, and we have quite a few speakers here today, but this no vote has to go ahead. Because see those black politicians up there like Linda Burney and the rest of them? I've had a gut full of them. They haven't even been to Laperouse. I'll bet you they haven't even been to Kurnell. They don't come down to the black communities. They're that rich. They don't give a shit about us people. And you know, I'm a taxpayer. So I was watching the news the other night, and here they are, with taxpayers' money, giving Linda Burney $2 million to run a yes vote. Now, you Australian people who work and pay tax, is that what you want to see? A yes vote? No. To run and keep the thumb on us people at a grassroots level? I certainly don't. I've just about had enough of them. They need to get rid of them. Get them out of that parliament. They're there for themselves and they're not there for the people. And this rally, you know, I just hope it goes somewhere. Because if I get close to them, they'll be getting a piece of my mind. Just about had enough of them. You know, every taxpayer must have been shocked to see $2 million put in for a yes vote. 3.6, and it's rising. Where does that money go? Write to your local MP and ask them, say, where, you know, all this money went in for a yes vote. That's part of my tax that I pay in there. Can you tell me, can you be accountable for that money? We want a financial audit on that money and where it went to. Well, I certainly do. Because I've had enough of them black cockatoos sitting in Parliament.
And the white one. And the white one's the corporation.
No, I don't want to insult black cockatoos. You know, even though they beat Lapa. No, but that's what they are to me. They sit there behind the big heads and sit there and say not one word But Linda's been out there boasting her mouth off. And I've had a gutful of her too.
You're fake. Fake.
Yeah. It's time she hung her boots up. She needs to retire or piss off somewhere else. You know, because I've had enough of her. She doesn't do a thing for Aboriginal people.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
They need to get their asses off them parliament chairs and get out to every mission in Australia and go and speak to people. Not just their community or my community, every mission. I think there's 159 missions in New South Wales.
Where's all that money going to?
Yeah. I want to know where that money's going to, Bree. Yes, babe. You know, that amount of money could have built 30 houses on a mission. No, the government don't want that. They've got a plan. I know what that plan is. I've been around too long. I'm a fighter. I'm an activist. And my mum and dad taught me how to be and what to do and how to speak. And I don't care who is listening out there in the black community. They need to get up off their asses and start speaking out loud. And say no. No to this voice.
We all do. We all Australians.
All Australians.
No.
All Australians. Every single one of them. Because, you know, it's going to benefit all of it. Black and white. In the long run. We, as Aboriginal or original allodial owners of the land, look that word up, allodial, superior. No landlords. We are a caring and sharing community of blackfellas. We're not greedy. We are not like those politicians. We share with the white people. We're not out there to take their land or their houses away. We want to live in peace and have a good life so that our kids, our grandkids and their kids and grandkids can lead a good life as well. We're not disrespectful, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to show some disrespect to those politicians today.
Good.
And they can sit on it all they want. I don't care, that they will not be telling me what to do ever again.
Good.
And their thumbs, you know, they can stick that where I think they can stick it. But anyway, I'd just like to say on behalf of my elders and my community at La Perouse, the Aboriginal Mission, and my mum and her 8 sisters, my grandma, my grandfather, my ancestors who were here on this land before Cook declared war on us, I'd like to welcome you to Gweagal country. Thank you.
Before Aunty Yvonne goes, I need you to hear about
grandmother was Queen Emma Timbri. Before she became a Timbri, her grandfather was Cooman, who was here at Kurnell. And he had 2 wives. One wife was Nardung, Black Nellie they called her, or Nellie Alonga. And Nellie had twin girls. And one of those girls was Elizabeth Cooman. And Elizabeth Cooman had Queen Emma Timbri, or Emma Waldron Lowndes. You can look the history up, it's all there. Emma Waldron Round. Because Elizabeth married a farmer here somewhere around here in the Southern Shire. I think his name is Hubert Waldron. So down the track, she met a very handsome man named George Timbry. George Trimmer Timbry. And their firstborn daughter was Jane Timbry, my great-grandmother. And Jane had 3 children. Jane, she had my grandfather, 1 sister, and another brother. The 1 sister didn't have children. She passed away early, but the 2 brothers survived, and my grandfather married a lady called Maud Walker. She was born on the hill down at the Illawarra at Bombo, and her name was Maud Walker. And she had 8 girls and 1 boy. The young boy died very young, but the 8 sisters kept going. And there's only 3 of them left. The eldest one at the moment is in a nursing home. She's blind. She doesn't know anybody at the moment. The second eldest is my mum, who's going the same way. And the youngest one, Aunty Bet, she's a classic. She's still going, but she has dementia, but not as bad. And they had lots of children. Those eight women had lots of children.
No TV.
No TV. No TV. So, yeah, we've got a pretty big tribe. So my line comes from the John Henry Sims and Jane Timbry line of Queen Emma Timbry. She's our queen. She's our matriarch. She is from here. She's from Guigal. But she was born on Darug country. The Darug language group people. And on Darug country, you have so many clans. And it's like Widjabul. The gal at the end means man or men. So I'm a Bundjalung. I'm a woman. And you have Camarigal, Baramatigal, Gaddigalion. The gal at the end of every chieftain is the chief or the warrior. And the Timbry bloodline stems from Pemaway. That's Pemaway's father, Widjabul. So I thought I'd just let you know that. And yeah, I hope my great-grandmother's listening today and my grandma. I miss them all. Anyway, thank you and welcome.
Look, I'm gonna let my brother speak right now because he's got a busy schedule. But I would like to introduce you, Mob, to the man. Hey, to the man. Anyways, Anthony Mundine, I'll let him speak for himself.
Hey, Mob. I'm just here today to support what's happening. You know, it's like what they're trying to do, this voice stuff is obviously trickery, we know, and trying to put us into a system that other people, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you know me, man, I fight for the truth always. I never back down to nothing. and I'm here to fight and to be on the truthful side and try and wake up as many people up as I can. I'll do a little bit of a profile, so hopefully we can fight the system, and I still want to look these daily values, and how I can help in that sense. So I'm with cousin Cindy. Hopefully we can make a change and make a difference and continue to fight and continue to spread the message. So I'm always here and always willing to stand on the front line. Yeah, so 100% no to this referendum stuff. 100% no. 100% no. You know what I mean? No contract, no consent, no deal. You know what I mean? They're trying to give a deal and no deal. So that's it.
So I'm just going to pass this on, and now we got my nephew, Luke Simpson, and I'll let him introduce himself.
No. Jingula, my name's Luke. Just want to pay my respects to the Gweagal land that we gather on today, the elders, past, the ancestors. I just also want to acknowledge the 369 different nations of this continent, and the 250 plus language groups also. What a time, I guess, to be alive, and what a time to be a part of the good fight, you know, the truthful fight, you know, standing for what is absolute rather than, you know, falling under the oppression, falling under the system of genocide. You know, this system has proven itself consistently to commit ongoing crimes against humanity, commit genocide. You know, they've done it to the original people for 235 years, and now they're coming after us all. We as the original people, Aunty Cindy, and the elders of this nation have called you guys here to inform you a little bit more about what the voice entails. The risk that it actually puts us as all people of this continent, you know? Us and them primarily needs to stop, because there is no division without this system being the perpetrator. Now, I'm here because I want to stand in wholeheartedly unity, solidarity. You know, I stand next to my banam and my auntie because we're here to stand for everyone, especially the judge and the children. You know, the fight that we don't fight today is the fight our children have to fight tomorrow. Ask yourself the question, if not me, who? If not now, when? This fight's been going on forever, and we need this fight to stop. This voice spells disaster. This voice doesn't give us a voice. If this voice gave us a voice, then why aren't the people down here listening to the grassroots people? Now, why is it only the mainstream and these politicians that are getting their voices heard? Now, we want to inform you of this, you know, the amendments made in the affairs of the Aboriginal people. We don't need this system here to govern our affairs. We are willing and able people. We are not incompetent. No, it comes when we unite, when we treaty as original bloodline people, afford you a legitimate solution, afford you a system that is of more prosperity, that is of more love, of more light. I thank you all for being here, and you know, for me, I'm here 100% to stand in my absolute truth, and I'll walk and I'll fight as much as I need for the protection of us all. And again, yeah, I'm thankful for everyone's attendance, and I'm thankful to be welcomed on the country by Arnie and Bulberg. Much love to you all.
I want to thank my brother and my nephew for being here today, and so I'm just going to let Uncle Michael speak now. And this man is a man full of a lot of knowledge. So,
hi everybody. It's a wonderful day actually to be here. First, let me acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands, and to acknowledge the dead and fallen who suffered as a result of the landing at this place all those years ago. And we can never forget that the killings did not stop once they landed. And one of the things that I'm going to start a project on around Sydney is to locate the original boundary that was set down as the area of the colony from Sydney Cove, because when you find the boundary, that's where you will find that a bloke by the name of Governor Phillip ordered the killing of Aboriginal people around Matraville and Lapa and Malabar, and he ordered them to be killed, and he cut their heads off. And when he cut their heads off, he then put their heads on stakes around the original location of the colony of Sydney. And so I'm looking for someone who's able to make heads of people who are clever at these things, so that we can put them on stakes. And then when we locate the original boundary around the city, we put those heads on there as a memorial to those who had fallen during that period. And this is what started Pomeroy's campaign against the colonists. So that history has to be resurrected, so that people are aware of how this colony was settled. But besides that, one of the things that I'm starting to realise, and I'm very much, as a former practitioner, legal practitioner in the white world, one of the things that I'm starting to find out is how the type of system that we have in this country. And believe it or not, when you look at the laws that we operate under and that govern Aboriginal people in this country right now, we have a system of apartheid. Now, the apartheid system, it's a legal apartheid system that's very cleverly hidden in the legislation. Now, when you look at the Commonwealth legislation, the Commonwealth acquired the power to pass laws for Aboriginal people since 1967. Prior to then, the Constitution had a clause in it that said that they accept Aborigines in terms of making laws for Aboriginal people. That referendum only gave Aboriginal people the right to be counted in the census, in determining the census, because the Australians were beginning to worry about how many Aboriginal people were living in Australia, and they hadn't had a proper statistical database for Aboriginal people. And so when they passed that referendum, when they put the referendum up, the referendum was not about giving Aboriginal people rights whatsoever. In fact, if you have a look at the data, and I've been through all of the correspondence and all of the executive government considerations in Canberra, I found that it wasn't until 1969, 2 years after the referendum, that Harold Holt, the bloke who disappeared, Prime Minister Holt asked them, what the hell are we going to do about Aborigines? That was in 1969, 2 years after the referendum. And then they tried to work out, and I've got the brief, they're back at my place. I have a brief where they said, well, the Commonwealth will continue a policy of assimilation. We will not deter in any way from our objectives in assimilating Aboriginal people and into one Australia. And the assimilation policy, of course, meant that we had to become like white people. We had to think like white people, talk like white people, live like white people, and just be part of that whole society. Our culture was to be erased. Our languages were to be erased. And so that policy just constantly continued. As the referendum, as they began to understand the power that they had at the Commonwealth level, they began to then set about how do we tame these creatures out there that were classified as savages. And so they continued on the policy of assimilation and stayed with the states. And the first policy that was put in place to erase us in terms of our memory as Aboriginal people was decided in 1936, sorry. And 1936, if you look, when I looked at that data, the strangest thing that I found, which I think was no coincidence, but there's a thing called in Germany, just prior to the Third Reich coming into power, there was a thing that was called the Wannsee Conference. And the Wannsee Conference established a policy to wipe out the Jews and erase the Jews from Germany. That policy was made at the same time they had the meeting in Canberra, exactly the same time. And the policies were almost identical. When you put the Wannsee papers together and the objectives to wipe out the Jews from Germany and Europe, it also fits in with the same time that they put in to wipe us out in Australia in 1936. Now, when you look at those papers, they continued on with that progression. Now, surprisingly enough, I also found documents where Robert Menzies, who was the Prime Minister at the time, travelled off to Berlin in 1936 and had a meeting with the Third Reich in Germany. They had a meeting, and then the papers that Robert Menzies came back with identified that Australia shall be the last bastion for the white race. And so they established a policy program based on the German Wannsee Conference papers and the objectives of the Third Reich. Now, if you don't believe me, get your butts down to Canberra and go in and have a look at all the documents that are there in the National Archive and National Papers. They're all there. So when you look at what's happening here in Australia, you begin to then couple what John Howard did when Robert Mugabe was taking the land back, planning to take the land back in Zimbabwe off the white farmers, British farmers who were sent out there to take up farms because of their service in the Second World War. And you'll find that when Mugabe started doing that, John Howard flew to London, and John Howard then made an offering that if London were to give all those Zimbabweans English passports, then all of those Zimbabweans can come to Australia and live in Australia. And they did the same thing when what that fellow name in South Africa, when Mandela took power, John Howard and the government here in Australia afforded them the same type of license to come to Australia. So what we have in Australia at the moment, and since all this time, is we have a policy that is to make Australia a country that is white and lives under white rules. I tell you all this because there are some sinister objectives that underlie this thing called this Yes campaign. And I'm particularly concerned because, you see, Dreyfus and the government have told Lydia Thorpe in the Senate, they've said it in Senate committees, etc., that this referendum is not going to impact on Aboriginal people's sovereignty. And that's a load of crap.
That's right.
Now, the way in which it's a load of crap is this. Now they're asking white people, they haven't asked us whether we wanted a referendum in the first place. Let's make that very clear. Yeah? Aboriginal people have not been asked whether they want to be part of the Constitution and be recognised. Now, in a democratic society, one would expect that that's something they would do. They would afford us the right to have a referendum amongst ourselves to determine whether we want to be part of that system. Now, that's never been done. They had this facade called the Uluru Conference, which I went to. I wasn't a delegate. They wouldn't allow me to be a delegate. But the delegates that were elected at those 18 national regional conferences never got to speak at that conference. Now, how do I know that? I was in the bloody room. Yeah? And I watched. And so I was sitting with all the ceremonial elders, the men. We were sitting there with red headbands, and I'm a bit disturbed about the fact that they put that bloody thing on TV advertisement, and my face shows up there with a red headband, sitting with a red headband man, as if I'm supporting that bloody thing. And so that's quite disturbing, actually, for me. But anyway, we didn't have any input, the ceremonial elders. We sat and we watched and we listened, and we didn't like what was going on. But even people from Darwin, from the National, what do they call it, the Bureau of Northern Land Council, when they went to go in there as delegates from the Bureau of Northern Land Council, they were in front of me going into that conference room, and they were told that they were not allowed to go in. They couldn't participate. It was only for those who were nominated at those regional conferences. And all of those blackfellas who worked for those peak body Aboriginal organisations that were the facilitators of all those conferences. And so when we got in there, those people, the Darwin mob, they walked out, told them to get ripped. Well, they were at other words, of course, and then just took off back to Darwin. There were another number of other people who came from Warburton and different places out in the desert and out in the communities, who were told that, okay, you can come, but we've got another room for you over on the other side over there with a television in it, and you can watch the proceedings there. But you don't have a right to have a say or come in and represent your community because we've already chosen. But anyway, just to sort of give you a little bit more information. So when the people began to start talking about some type of statement, the group that were elected as delegates to go there were not given the microphone. And Lydia Thorpe got up and asked, could I have the microphone? And they gave it to her because of who she was. When they gave her the microphone, they shouted her down. These bureaucrats who were administering and facilitating the conference actually shouted her down. And the Aboriginal people who were the delegates, because they were not given the microphone to speak as well and talk about what their regions wanted and what the regions wanted them to say, the people just looked at each other, and then all of a sudden they got up and they walked out. So about 44%, 48% of that proceedings of the people who were there actually got up and walked out, and it was quite a shock. It split the group quite considerably. Now I remember Noel Pearson and others were running around talking to the media, you know, just saying to them, look, you know, we'll never invite you back, or we'll report you to government, and we'll never invite you back to cover any conferences that we ever have in the future if you report a split. Unfortunately, the good old ABC managed to sort of ignore their pleas and started reporting it. But it was quickly curtailed because, you know, the media in Australia is controlled by the government, and we're certainly not going to get a look in a no campaign here unless we do something drastic. And so the media actually shut down the opposition to what was happening at Uluru. Now, the other thing about Uluru, if I can just tell you this, I have a sister-in-law who lives there, right? And she's from that community. And so I went to her place later to have a cup of tea and meet up with my nieces and nephews there at Mundine. And the thing that disturbed her was the fact that the old people at Mundine had no bloody idea what was going on. No idea. And so the people, they were saying, look, they come here, they put on a barbecue. Yeah, we're going to have a barbecue. They bring in other dancers, like from Arnhem Land and other places, to dance here, and then they pay people from Armatur and Ernabella and those places in APY land, just down below in South Australia. They pay them to come and dance. And so, you know, blackfellas are not going to knock back $1, especially when it's a $3. And so he goes and dances for them without having any understanding of what the significance was that was happening here. So the spectacle was that these people here were enjoying and celebrating this new event, when in fact they had no bloody idea what the hell was going on. Right? And the elders were certainly not. There were plenty of free feed. And of course, you know, who's going to knock back a free feed, you know? And so they come and they're all sitting there watching what's going on. None of those people I take that back. 2 out of that community, Mundine, one of the senior ladies and one man who was the chairman of the Mundine community, actually participated in the conference but sat there dumbfounded. And the woman, she was much more vocal, but she said her piece. Now, at the end of the day, there was a lot of confusion going on during the period of this consultation process, and everybody kept watching, and we were observing that the group, Noel Pearson, Marcia Langton, what's that other one down here, Megan Davis, Pat Anderson, and the likes. Every now and then, these guys would, as a group, get up and walk out of the conference, and then we wouldn't see them for about an hour or so, and then they'd come back into the conference. And so this went on over a period of 2 days. Now, at the end of the day, when the people walked out, that's when they took the vote. The Aboriginal people who were the delegates from the 18 conferences, regional conference, were not in that room when the vote was taken to support that Uluru statement. And so then what happened was that they brought a blank canvas out and laid it out on the floor, on the ground. And they had asked people to go and sign this blank canvas. We were watching them. There was no Uluru statement on that canvas. There was nothing. They put the document on there after people signed it. Now, the thing that disturbs a lot of people in the old men now out there, particularly Murray George and a few others, they've got a sovereignty movement. They've had it for a while. I've been working out there in the communities with them in teaching them to understand what sovereignty meant. And I was telling them that sovereignty in the white man's world is very different. Sovereignty's got nothing to do with land. Absolutely nothing to do with land. Sovereignty is about decision making. Sovereignty is about whether you have a structure in place where you can exercise decision making that governs your people, right? And so the white people distinguish between the difference between land ownership and proprietary interest in real property, as opposed to a decision making as you would in a government. That's why they elect governments. And so because the white people, and you go into the courts, read all the court decisions, they say that Aboriginal people did not have a sovereign body that could exercise sovereignty, decision making over their people and over their country. And as a consequence, the courts get away here in Australia with saying that the Aboriginal people did not have that type of structure, and therefore sovereignty cannot be accepted. And so when I explain this to the communities, to the people, they say, what a lot of bullshit. Because we got the Maori fellas sitting over there under the tree over there. And when we want to talk about woman business, we go over there and talk to that mob over there. Right? Now, that's our parliament, but we don't operate the same way white people do it. And so the courts and the legal system in Australia are operating a Eurocentric view of how things work, right? And so it's one way and one way only, and that's white way. Yeah, white is right in their sort of thought patterns. Now, when we begin to talk about this, what we're trying to do now, around this country is to try and break down that governance perspective. We have to break it. And I'm involved in a Supreme Court case here right now in New South Wales. In the Supreme Court, I'm up against the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, who bought land for my people about 26 years ago.
The ILC.
At the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation. And I'm now in court with them because they've taken court action to kick me off my country because I'm exercising sovereign rights over my land. And as a political activist, then I'm the target. Now, if I destroy Michael Anderson and shame him in the eyes and show that the white courts are going to support us and we're going to kick him off his country out of Gadooga and in Queensland there, if we kick him off his country, well, then that'll kill the sovereignty movement and show these blackfellas, you're not going to beat us. Now, the problem I have with that is that it's blackfellas that are doing it. And they're doing it on behalf of white people. And so, anyway, I'm in the Court of Appeal in the Supreme Court in New South Wales, and I now have to deal with another cross-claim that they put on me yesterday. And so they're trying to break me as well as in terms of money, and they're also trying to get me off my land, but they're in for one hell of a fight. So I say that simply because, the hypocrisy of this bloody constitutional referendum that they put up, saying that it's going to help Aboriginal people and do something for Aboriginal people. And at the same time, they're ridding Aboriginal people of any access to their country or their rights to their country. They're stopping them. They're preventing them, and this is horrible. Now, when I talked earlier about apartheid, right? In Australia, a lot of people, Gary Foley, he coined the phrase "native title is not land rights." Now, I agree with that, and I told a member of the New South Wales Native Title Services Corporation last night that, mate, you need to go back and have a look at what you're doing to our people, claiming native titles throughout New South Wales. And when he asked me why, I said, well, native title is useless to us, absolutely useless. Now, I say that even though my mob keep telling me I can't get off our native title in Queensland, but that's helped me understand a little bit more about how in the internal workings of this monster. Now, what I told my friend last night was go back and talk to your lawyers who work for you, and you ask those lawyers to show you the deeds and titles with the names of successful native title claims in New South Wales, and you ask them to go and get the title deeds out of the registry, New South Wales Land Registry Office, and have a look at whose name's on it. And he said, why? I said, because it's not the people who now has exclusive possession over that land as a native title right given to you by the federal court. And he said, what names are on those titles? Do you know? I said, yes, I know. They're classified as USL. And he said, what the hell does that mean? I said, unused state land. So all native title claims in this country, no matter whether you go to Northern Territory, West Australia, or anywhere else, all native title claims that are exclusive possession to Aboriginal people, it's not in the name of the people who obtain that become the native title common law holders. No. Now, I use the term common law holders. A common law holder, now, sorry about saying this, but see this old wonder here? We would say Ilimba wonder, but we say wonder. Yeah, wonder, white man, yeah? Now, this fella, in terms of land rights, has got more rights over this country than I have. When he buys a block of land, his name will go on the title. Aboriginal people's names don't go on title, on any land titles at all in this country. Now, if you ever look at Aboriginal corporations that are registered in this country, when you look at the Aboriginal corporations, all Aboriginal corporations, whether you're registered under ASIC or not, if you are 100% Aboriginal on that board, then you are classified as an Indigenous corporation. And if you look at the statutes, the laws, Commonwealth laws, in regards to corporate law, you will find that even though you may be under ASIC, which is very different from the ORIC one, the Aboriginal one, because you're all Aboriginal, the Commonwealth government can come in and access that corporation anytime they want to, just because you are Aboriginal. And that's written in a statute, in the Commonwealth Law Statute. If you have a look in the Native Title Act, which is a 700-page document, so if you want to sit and read it and try and find out what section it is, I just forget, but it's way down the bottom anyway. And of course, that means that that Aboriginal corporation and all its assets, by the way, belong to the Commonwealth. And they can come in and take it off you anytime they want to. So what we have to do is we have to change the culture in this country, the political and legal culture. Now, that's not going to be an easy thing to do, right? We started succeeding after the Aboriginal Embassy because one of the things that used to happen was Gough Whitlam, when he was in opposition, came across and sat with us on the lawns. Sorry, I'm taking up your time. Everybody's right for time? Yeah, I hope you're not in a hurry to go somewhere. Okay, I just need to give you some information, right? So when Whitlam came and sat with us, he used to walk out of that Parliament House and he paid us due respect because he came to us. He didn't ask us to go into that white monstrosity that they have there. And so he came and sat with us and he'd sit in the tent with us and the people who came were key executive government members after the success of the 1972 Commonwealth election. There was Gough Whitlam, then there was Gordon Bryant, who became the first Minister for Aboriginal Affairs under his regime, who was very much involved with the old Pocatsi era, the Federal Council for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander one. That was their forerunning national organisation before anybody else. And then there was a bloke by the name of Lionel Murphy, who became a High Court judge, but Lionel Murphy was the Attorney General. There was another fellow called Kep Enderby, who was a local member for Canberra, MP, and Kep Enderby became the Crown Solicitor. Now, these were high, important executive people in the executive government under the Labor government of Whitlam. Now, we negotiated an agreement with Gough Whitlam, and the agreement was that we would initiate a strategy to get back land in our ownership. Secondly, we would develop an economic strategy that would create economic well-being and economic independence for Aboriginal people around this country. And then thirdly, we were afforded the right of, under international law, the right of self-determination. And so so we started doing that. And then all of a sudden, what we realised, however, I've done this after, many years later, it was a clever move because on the one hand, we were blinded by our excitement to become self-determining and start obtaining all of these things through the Labor government. But the Labor government also had a hidden agenda. And the hidden agenda was to break the Black Power movement. And the Black Power movement was one hell of a movement in this country, right? Now, the way in which they broke it up was money. Very clever. And so they paid, we were campaigning for preschools, we were campaigning for medical services, legal services, housing companies, etc. All those things that, we want to take control of to improve our people's lives. Now, so Gough Whitlam made all this money available. So it was free money for black folk. Yeah? And so we started legal services, we started housing companies, we started all those things. Now, the only housing company since 1972 that continues to be in existence and independent and operates by itself is the Sydney Housing Company, run by the Mundine family. Yeah, well, with his committee, of course. Now they're very successful in Redfern, extremely successful, and they stayed alive. And that was the only one I ever got involved in trying to help keep it alive, because and I'll say his name because I have no problems with it. Charles Perkins tried to take all the assets from the original legal service, the original housing company in Redfern, and take it back to the Commonwealth and put it all in the hands of the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth would then do what they want. And I'm telling you, that housing company would never exist now, and there would be no houses in Redfern. And I say that simply because Walgett started a housing company, Moree started a housing company, and I'll stay with those two towns because I come from Walgett and I know Moree very well. They had each of those towns when John Howard came into being had Walgett had 36 houses with 16 vacant blocks of land that they were about to build on. Moree had 42 houses with another 10 blocks of land that they were about to build on. And then all of a sudden, in comes the heavyweights of the ATSIC Regional Council. And then they said, okay, we don't like those people who are running those organisations. They came in, sent in an organisation called ORIC, who appointed administrators. As soon as they come in, they appointed a white administrator who charged $300,000 for his services, and they had to sell all the assets in each town. Not one of those towns owns any houses by themselves anymore. All Aboriginal organisations that operate, the only successful one outside of Sydney that operates is the medical services, the Walgett Aboriginal Legal Service, because we stuck our guns and because we had too many politically minded and legal minded Aboriginal people operating in Walgett. And so we were able to stop them from doing what they did in other places by shutting them down. Now, so if you go throughout Australia and have a look at what Aboriginal people own, we own bugger all. We own absolutely nothing. And so after all these years, since 1967, we are still welfare dependent. And so the government is controlling our economy. Now, just another little one to say how what they're doing to us. And I'm telling you this so that you have a bloody good understanding of what's going on right now in Canberra and what's about to happen. Yeah? I had the privilege of travelling as a human rights envoy on the staff of Whitlam. And anyway, after I came back from the United States and other places, looking at treaties and other things around the world, one of the things that I found was there was a sinners movement going on in Canberra about hog-tying Aboriginal advancement, because they'd realised that the Aboriginal population was increasing 9 to 1. That's how fast our population is growing, 9 to 1. But at the same time, our death rate is about 7 out of 10. The high death rate amongst our people is really creating problems for our increase in our population. We're unable to sustain the lives of many of our people through helplessness and hopelessness. And they just got no idea. There's no leadership out there, none. But let me go back to when I was working with Whitlam. When we did that, I ended up on a diplomatic trip to 5 African nations with Whitlam and a fellow called Aussie Cruz from down the south coast. Now, when we went, I recall a meeting we had, a dinner meeting with Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, in Harare. And Mugabe sort of was quite confrontational. You know, he had no respect, not much respect for white people at all. And of course, Gough Whitlam being white, he didn't give a damn whether he was next Prime Minister or not. And so he said to him, how many Aborigines have you got in Australia? And he said, oh, they represent about 1.5%, 2%. What's that worth? Oh, that's about maybe 500,000, if that. Well, then with a country as rich as yours, why don't you just agree that, okay, in 10 months or 2 years' time, on a date, all you Aboriginal people get their names, every man, woman and child, and then agree to pay them $1 million a year over the next 10 years after that date, and say, okay, we paid our debt. And there was a fellow sitting next to me who was the ambassador. His name was Mick Young, a former Labor politician, MP, from South Australia. And he was the ambassador to Zimbabwe, and he kicked me under the table when Gough Whitlam was about to say something in response. He kicked me under the table and he said, I don't know what he's going to say because I don't know what the agreement was. I was never there. You bastard. Denial, yeah. Anyway, Whitlam's response was this. If we develop a strategy where we do that and we develop at the same time businesses and opportunities for Aboriginal people to get themselves out of poverty and to do things, he said there'd be a lot of, about 1/3 of the population would be grabbed by by con artists and tricksters who would con the people out of their money, right? And another half would gamble it all and give it away, yeah, and just lose it. He said then the other 2/3, about 1/3 of them would end up buying businesses right throughout rural Australia. And if they buy rural businesses in rural Australia, like garages and little shops and all that sort of stuff, well, there'd be no need for white people to be in Australia on the other side of Bathurst, Orange, on the other side of places like Emerald in Queensland. And there'd be no need for white people to be down past Catherine. You'd have a population in Alice Springs, that's about all. And then the rest of the population would be little pockets of white population in places like the Goldfields and the Gascoyne in Western Australia, and all stuck around Port Lincoln and all those places around South Australia where the white population is gathered. He said the Aboriginal people would ultimately own every business inside the country. And he said, and as they amass more wealth, it would be very easy for them to push white people off the coastline of Australia into ships and send them back to where they come from. He said, now that's a reality. And so I had to talk to him in the motel that night. I said, what the hell did you say there? Yeah. And he said, Michael, he said, that's a reality. And frankly, people, that's what they're frightened of. They are so scared of this. Now, already, if you look at Australia, you will find that Aboriginal people own 52% of Australian landmass. Not many people realise that, but we do own 52% of the landmass of this country. Our problem is they can't afford to give us money to be self-determining because we will ultimately encroach and take the rest of the country back. We may not do it their way, how you come and just squat with the military and shoot any bastard and say you can't be here, but we'll do it their way. And right now, the Commonwealth government are so scared of that occurring. Now, I'll finish off with this. The royalty money, the native title has allowed one aspect, or I do want to go to common law, one aspect of Aboriginal people, but unfortunately they got it bound up again. And that is royalties from the natural resources that are being mined on Aboriginal lands. The natural resources around this country are reaping in billions. More than 21% of Australia's economy comes from mining. And 19% of that economic wealth goes out of one place, Port Hedland. One place, Port Hedland. And so the Aboriginal people, and I've talked to the leaders there this morning actually, because we're going after the state government. We're about to prosecute the state government for wrongful dealings with their native title. And BHP, surprisingly enough, are going to assist them to fight the state government of Western Australia over the development of Port Hedland. And so we're in a process of doing that, and this is an Aboriginal initiative, exercising a sovereign right that we have, right? And so now, though, I do a lot of work up in the Kimberleys as well, and throughout the Western Desert. Now, one of the things that it doesn't surprise me, but it shocked me actually, to realise that billions of dollars are in royalty trust funds around this country. And those royalty monies are not controlled by the Aboriginal people. Not one Aboriginal person has any control or sit on any committee that operates a trust for and on their behalf. All those trust accounts are administered by white people. 70% of the trust accounts in Australia are being run by the Myers Foundation out of Melbourne. Now, the Myers Foundation have in fact now cordoned off a particular section of their operations so that it's not part of the mainstream of the Myers Foundation, but it's now subsidiary agencies of the Myers Foundation. And that's billions of dollars. There's one trust account, which is the Mardu Trust Account, which is the Great Sandy Desert in Western Australia. The Mardu Trust Account has white people. They have 45 white people employed to look after one trust account. 45 white people. And they all operate out of Melbourne and Canberra. Now, the other thing is that when they go and have a meeting with them to talk about the trust account, the meeting costs them $500,000 a meeting. And that's because they charter a plane, they bring in a security in the plane, they bring in state police in the plane, and their staff, and they bring cut sandwiches for them to have during the meeting on that aeroplane. So you can imagine the frustration of the people. Now, I've seen how they do it and what they do in terms of giving royalty money to the people. Aboriginal people are not permitted to receive 1 cent in cash from the royalty money. So I'll give you an example. In Kununurra, right, the people of the Bundjalung people and Widjabul people, these fellas, and the Marong mob, these people, when they get their royalty money, they have to write a list up to $2,000 each, a list of what they want to buy. And if what they want to buy is not on the list later, when they get the brochure to go to the shop, then they're not allowed to buy that additional item that they may want to buy. And so this is how they're controlling Aboriginal people. This is Aboriginal people's money. This has got nothing to do with any of the Commonwealth money that's being granted out there. And so when we talk about an apartheid system in this country, I'm talking about a very real apartheid system. And so I'll end on this. In the legal system in Australia, they have now successfully separated us into an Aboriginal rights program, very different from the white mainstream program. And the way in which they've done that is very clear. We are not entitled to ordinary common law rights that a white person has, because they keep taking you back to Aboriginal statute that's controlled by the Commonwealth government. And so Aborigines have to operate according to what the statute says, and the judges in the courts have this problem now, and I've got them sort of in a rock and a hard place right now in the Supreme Court, because I'm saying, no, wait a minute. If I'm a citizen of this country with the same rights, then I want those rights applied to me the same as they would apply to a white person. I don't want those rights to be separated over here under native title. I want those rights, I want you to consider me as a non-Aboriginal person with the same rights as a non-Aboriginal person. Now, if that happens, in New South Wales, 42% of New South Wales automatically re-emerges out of the hidden concrete as being claimable and have to be paid, compensation has to be paid to the Aboriginal people. And that's west of the Darling River, the Barker River. Now, so these things are starting to emerge, and the reason it's starting to emerge is because Yunupingu, before he died, he put a case in against them taking land off his people in 1912 in Yolngu country, and he won the case. But the decision came down after Yunupingu died. And so it's called the Gummidge clan, and he took it for his clan, not for his tribe, but for his clan. And he won it. And he also won the fact that the minerals that they took, the bauxite at Nullumboy, was his. And so now they've estimated that the land value that the Commonwealth has to pay is $700 million just for his clan territory, plus all the money that went to the Commonwealth government from the royalties from the mine. That's 4% of the total earnings since that bauxite mine started. Now, the Pandora's box that has opened is that I've got a legal brief that fell off a truck to John Howard when he did the 10-point plan, changes the Native Title Act in 1998, which said that if Aborigines win one case that gives them recognition of title to the mineral, then every ounce of gold that's ever been found in this country since colonisation, those tribes will have to be paid money for all that gold right back to when they first started it. That puts this country into bankruptcy in our favour. And so there is now, you'll see in the media over the next couple of weeks, you'll see that Mr. Dreyfus is appealed that case. He's seeking leave to appeal the Gummidge case because that's what's going to happen. Australia will be broke if they don't do it, because Aboriginal people start putting in claims all over this country, they will not have the money to pay back. This country will be in bankruptcy, insolvency. It will be insolvent, and we take control and take a lien over everything that they own. Now, that's a reality, people. That's not fiction. Yeah. And so the wheels are progressing, the wheels are turning in that regard. And so, yeah, some bars are going to have to talk to us very quickly. Thank you. I will take questions if you have some questions.
What are they trying to do with the voice and the Constitution?
All right. The voice, what they're doing with the voice is that they're not going to, there's no word, there's no suggestion anywhere about sovereignty, nothing. So, and Dreyfus is correct when he says that it's not going to impact on Aboriginal, not going to take away Aboriginal sovereignty. He's absolutely correct. However, there's a string attached to that and a caveat. And the caveat is that there's a word called acquiescence in the English language. And if you learn to understand what that word means, acquiescence, it means that when 18 million white people vote to say, yes, we recognise Aborigines and yes, we allow them to have a voice, right? And by the way, they can legislate today for the voice. They don't need a referendum. And so so what it is, it's a puppet show that tells the rest of the world that Aborigines have now agreed to be governed by their coloniser. That's what this means. It's a very clever ploy that they've engaged in, and unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I've spoken with various ambassadors in Canberra, as well as world leaders, both in London as well, believe it or not. I've got some supporters in London who are MPs and members of the Lord, and I just came back from London about 3 weeks ago, talking to them, and I met with other ambassadors in London as well. And one of the things that they're saying is that if this referendum gets up and is successful, then the world and the United Nations and the rest of the world will view it as Aboriginal people agreeing to be governed by their coloniser. And so that puts an end to any sovereign exercise that we may wish to exercise later, because now we've handed ourselves over to them to govern us. Any other question? Okay, I'm glad I educated you very well. Oh, all right.
I'm quite inspired myself by the story of Fred Hooper and
I'll be meeting him on Sunday, yeah, in
he's
Perth.
at a pathway for Aboriginal nations.
Well, I helped write Fred. I helped write his Declaration of Independence, the Murruwarri Declaration of Independence. We have a Declaration of Independence. We sent it off to the Queen. Fred sent it off to the Queen. The Wik people have done the same thing. The Mebbingarri people in Eastern Kimberley did the same thing. And there are several others, like the Yidinji in Cairns, have done it. Now, this is real, people. And I got that in the court here as well, because we not only did a declaration of independence, which is an international legal right to free yourself from subjugation by a colonising people or by a tyranny. And so that's been proven in the International Court of Justice advisory decision to the United Nations Security Council on the right of Kosovo, the people, the Armenians, to free themselves from subjugation by Yugoslavia, the old Yugoslavia. Now, so the international opinion under international law is that people have a right to free themselves from subjugation and tyranny, and of course occupation, as we have here in this country. Now, on the other side of the coin, in exercising that sovereign right, not many of you will know this, but just after Muramu did his Declaration of Independence and announced it to the world in Cairns, because Muramu sat with us in Canberra and we wrote it all up for him and helped him. Muramu, when he went back, then all of a sudden, you might recall Australia's G20 meeting, when they had the meeting in Brisbane. But all of the work goes on 2 weeks in advance by all the diplomats. And they were meeting in Cairns. Surprisingly enough, Russia, Mr. Putin, wanted to protect his people who were in Cairns. So he brought in 2 nuclear submarines, 1 aircraft, and 2 frigate ships that protected the aircraft, and they parked them in the Yidinji waters off Cairns. Now, you might all recall this in the media when, what's his name, that funny little fella, Tony Abbott. Yeah, God, how could you forget Tony Abbott? God, most famous Prime Minister ever. Anyway, yeah, no. Anyway, you might recall in the media he was going to, shirt, tie, or grab, or whatever he was proposing to do with Putin when he arrived in Brisbane. But at the same time, what was going on in the media, and the media didn't cover much of this. But you see, the Australian government were trying to get Putin to take his ship out of Australian waters. Except that what the media didn't say was that Putin said, I'm not in Australian waters. I'm in Yidinji waters. And there was absolutely bloody nothing they could do about it. That's just another little story that you all need to know. But I will say this, and I think a lot of you young people need to start a campaign on this. Right now, there's a question that I've been asking there's a thing called the Brisbane Line. Have you ever heard of the Brisbane Line? Okay, no hand. The Brisbane Line is a line that was drawn in the Second World War from Brisbane to Port Hedland. Now, this line was drawn across. It's known in the international community and here in Australia as the Brisbane Line. I've seen the papers where they ceded all of the north above that ceding line, above that line, and ceded it to a man called MacArthur, an American military general, and they ceded to him to govern and protect for Australia. Because England refused to allow the Australian military to get involved in the fight against the Japanese that were coming down from the top. And Australia were governed by England at that time, and still is. But they refused Australia to participate in defending the country. So they brought in and they allowed MacArthur to take total control of that area. And the question is, that I have today, is whether that cession to America through MacArthur has ever been rescinded. Because right now, you've got 37,000 American military troops up in Darwin, just south of Darwin. Not only that, you have American military bases up around Cairns. Now, they're preparing a massive North protection program just in case China and Australia goes to war over Taiwan with America. Now, that means that all that area up there is under threat. Now, when you look at the Brisbane Line, that incorporates a place called Tea Tree in north of Alice Springs. Between Tea Tree and Yuendamu and Papanya is a massive military complex that not many people know about. What I'm telling you now, it's a massive military complex that is called the Over-the-Horizon Radar System. Right? Now, the Over-the-Horizon Radar System is Australia's contribution to the Americans' ability to be able to look at all of Southeast Asia. And so without that complex there, America would not be able to operate their drones over Afghanistan, Iran, anywhere in Europe. They wouldn't be able to do it without that complex. So, if I know that, the intelligence of China and other places know it as well. So the first place they're going to attack is that place there. They're going to bomb that. And the fallout is going to be blackfellas underneath. There are no white people living out there. Nobody. And all those places, when you travel up in Northern Territory and North Queensland, and in the Kimberleys where they're starting to do things, they're all blackfellas, right next door. No white people. You might have a couple of white people who own the shop and the store and the garage, but that's all you got. So the people who are going to hurt most are Aboriginal people. So for all you young people who really want to start a campaign against what's going on underneath, you need to have a look at that. And, you know, when you've got some crazy person, I shouldn't say that, but, you know, our dear old Minister Linda Burney, saying that Aboriginal people are only going to be talking about health, housing and education, well, shit, you don't need a bloody voice to deal with that. No, that's just a human right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Michael. Thank you for coming. It means a lot because, as you know, they are our elders, and we need to know they've been in this fight longer than us as the younger generation, and that's why we always need to listen to our elders, because it's about our elders and it's about the next generation. That's why I appreciate all. In saying that, we have a special guest, another special guest that has travelled from Canberra, and I'd like to introduce you to Uncle I call him uncle. He said, just call me Lindsay. It's like, wait there. You our elder, you know. But I'd like to introduce you to a special man who's been around and had a lot to do with our people, Uncle Reverend Lindsay McDowell. Can we give him a... He's an old, knowledgeable man, and I think we have to listen to what he's got to say today, because he's an old truth teller. And we're about the truth, right? Yep. Got my booger. Thank you, Uncle.
And thank you. And thank you, all of you, for allowing me to be part of your gathering. I want to take a moment to honour the First Nations people of all these lands, to honour the elders and members of communities, both past and present, who belong to country on the homeland of their people. I haven't come to talk about the referendum. I've come to talk about the truth-telling. I've come to talk about the true history of what has happened on this continent following colonisation. Aussie Cruise and I have been working side by side, year in and year out for 26 years, on putting together the truth-telling that explains in logical sequence as it unfolded what happened that caused so much harm to your people. I'm going to digress for just a moment to illustrate with a point where I'm going in this talk. We have found the records of the first land grant made by Governor Arthur Phillip to an English settler. We have found the records. We know the date it happened, when the very first land grant was made to an English settler. It was 30 acres.
Keeps flickering red. So. Is it still?
And it was out at what is now called Parramatta, near there. And a young English settler was granted 30 acres. His brief was to prove that he could grow food to sustain the colony. English tucker. Now, we have found the records where Governor Phillip made that land grant of 30 acres, the first land grant. What we can't find are the records that reveal how Governor Phillip legally acquired that 30 acres to grant to anybody. We can't find that record. Why can't we find that record? Because it doesn't exist. No. She knows I'm an old man. We can't find the records because there's only one logical conclusion you can reach, that 30 acres was stolen land. That's the point I'm revolving around today. In truth-telling, I'm going to be drawing from the British records. Some of you will feel disappointed about that. Some of you would want me to be drawing from the First Nations records, because you know what happened better than anybody does. And I understand that that is how you would feel. But there's a reason why today, at least, I'm drawing on the British record. Because that mischievous section of the wider Australian community that is opposed to First Nations ever being other than oppressed, when they hear your claims about what was done to your people, what they do is they say, oh, come on, that didn't happen. You just made it all up. But when the perpetrators wrote down the record whereby they said, we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, it's very, very hard for anyone out there to deny the truth of those records. They were written by the perpetrators of our colonising history, and they were left for us to draw on. And so I'm taking you back to 1768. That's August 1768. That's 20 months before Cook and the Endeavour dropped anchor just over here. We've been, Aussie Cruise and I, side by side, through thick and thin, the wind and the rain and the dust and the mud, we've unearthed the records of what happened. When the Endeavour was berthed at Plymouth in southern England, preparing to set sail in August 1768, the British authorities came to Cook with instructions. There were 2 British authorities of the 4 British authorities that all had their fingers in the pie. One authority was the British Admiralty. The other authority was the British Royal Society. This is what happened. On the 30th of July, 1768, the British Admiralty came to Cook with instructions, and soon after, so did the Royal Society. And to paraphrase their instructions, they went like this. When you visit the people in other lands and you are inclined to become aggressive, don't do it. Just don't do it. The British Admiralty handed Cook an envelope containing these words. You are to observe the inhabitants, if there be any, and endeavour by all proper means to cultivate a friendship and an alliance, inviting them to trade and showing them every kind of civility and regard. You are also, with the consent of the inhabitants, to take possession of country with the consent of the inhabitants. That was dated 30th July 1768. few days later, Lord Morton, James Douglas was his name, the President of the British Royal Society, also came to Cook with a sealed envelope that was later found to contain these words. This is dated the 10th of August, 1768. You can see why I'm going into records that have been written down. The record said this: have it in view that shedding the blood of those people is a crime of the highest nature. They are human creatures, made by the same Almighty God, equally under his care with the most polished European. Perhaps, being less offensive, even more entitled to his care. They are the natural, and in the strictest sense of the word, the legal possessors of the regions they inhabit. No European nation has a right to occupy any part of their country or settle among them without their voluntary consent. How many people here knew this level-headed kind of leadership was so prominent in the UK in 1768?
I believe it.
I didn't know.
I believe it. I believe it. Yeah, I believe it. I didn't know it, but I believe it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's the written record for all the world to see. Yeah.
I want it.
I've got to talk to the next crowd. You can see why I'm drawing on the British records just for this moment today. That's the record. That's the instruction given to Cook. Let's have a look at the reality of what happened. On the 29th of April 1770, 20 months after those words were written, 20 months, the Endeavour arrived just here and dropped anchor, and here's the record. Come back to that in a minute. We parleyed with them for about a quarter of an hour. That's 15 minutes, folks, last time I looked. They remained resolute against our landing, and so a musket was fired. And then another musket loaded with small shot was fired at the eldest. And then another was immediately fired at him. In other words, what happened to the instructions? What happened to the friendship and civility? What happened to the respect and the amity? After 15 minutes, who does that sort of thing? After 15 minutes, an armed attack was launched against the Guigal people on country, and the crew were still in the boat when that armed attack was begun. They had about 30 or 40 crew, the record goes on to tell us, coming at the shore in rowboats, and 2 warriors opposed the landing. Why wouldn't they? up here on the rise was their village with women and children. 30 or 40 of the strangest looking creatures you ever did see was coming straight at their village. Where would this end? In what way would it end? Why wouldn't they oppose the landing? Cook might have laid back on the oars and sent the crew back, and 2 or 3 of them remain stationary until some kind of confidence built and perhaps some kind of yarn could happen. The record tells us differently. After 15 minutes, an armed attack was launched. When you read that one-page record, it reveals that in that single afternoon, and I remind us all, this is the very first moment of interaction between our two peoples. It was our very first day together, and boy, did it turn into a picnic. In that afternoon, 4, not less than 4, criminal offences were unleashed against the Gweagal people. The first one was the launching of the armed attack. The last one was when they left, they recorded that they stole all the fishing, all the spears that they could find in the village. They described the spears. They were tipped with 4 sharp prongs. They were fishing spears. The conclusion, when they left that day, they took with them, and they stressed, all we could find. They took with them the community's food harvesting equipment. Last time I looked, that kind of theft is a criminal offence. There were other such criminal offences that day. And I make a point. If those same criminal offences had been launched against any beach village in the United Kingdom by the Endeavour and the crew, by Lieutenant James Cook and the crew of the Endeavour, if the same criminal offences had been launched against any UK beach village, the entire crew would have been subject to British law. They would have been tried and convicted, and my guess is the leaders executed. Those same offences happening just here, not only has there been no accountability, those unresolved crimes are still sitting on the shelf unresolved with no accountability. Do you know that every year on the 29th of April that landing is commemorated?
29th of April.
And the question hanging over us all is, why the difference? Is the answer at the end of the day that some lives don't matter? Australia is eventually going to have to answer the question. When a criminal offence happens and in one country it attracts the most severe sentencing, but in another country it is commemorated, why the difference? And this is just the first day. Up until that moment, I've just run past you the very first wrongdoing that happened between our people. Up until that moment, there had been no wrongdoing by the British people against your people. There is no crime involved in sending a ship around the world to visit countries. There's nothing wrong in that at all. But the moment Cook stood in the bow of his landing craft and opened fire, in that very second, history here changed forever. I am intentionally bringing to your attention the very first wrongdoing in logical sequence so that we have a clear understanding of just what did happen and how it unfolded. That brings me to wrongdoing number two, and I have only 2 and 3 to go. I've got to leave, I'm sorry. I've been forced to catch an early train because there's track problems on the track I've got to travel on, and the train is leaving earlier than we had believed when I arranged to come here. Wrongdoing number 2. The Endeavour is no longer in Kamay Botany Bay. We are talking about not the 29th of April anymore. We're talking about the 22nd of August, 1770. And the record reveals that the Endeavour had reached what is now known as Cape York and turned the corner to the left and headed west and stopped at a small island that is now called Possession Island, that is in Kararig country. Island, yeah. What happened there on Possession Island, Cook wrote, I read from the Endeavour Journal, I had in the name of His Majesty taken possession of several places along this coast, and I now once more hoisted the English colours. And in the name of His Majesty King George III took possession of the whole eastern coast from an unnamed latitude to this place, meaning where he was standing. And I took possession of the whole east coast together with all the bays, harbours, rivers, islands situated upon that said coast. And we saw upon all the adjacent lands and islands a great number of smokes. Wait for it. A certain sign. They are all inhabited. We have daily seen smokes on every part of the coast we have lately been upon. Cook took possession knowing he was surrounded by inhabitants, and where was the consent? Let me develop that just a little bit more. When we read up and down the record, above and below this page I'm brought to you today, Cook reveals that when he raised his hand at Possession Island, he raised it toward the south. And he said he took possession all the way to the 38th parallel. How many people here know where the 38th parallel is? I didn't know, but I found out the 38th parallel runs through Melbourne. How about that? Let's join up the dots here. Cook was standing at a location just near Cape York, and he spoke a declaration over what we now know were many sovereign nations. And he spoke that declaration all the way from Torres Strait southward down to the 38th parallel, which is Melbourne, taking possession of the whole eastern coast. If you draw a straight line from Possession Island down to just east of Melbourne to the Kurnai country, it teaches you something. That straight line falls across Kararig Nation. It takes in Bundjalung Nation. It takes in Gamilaroi Nation. It goes straight across the middle of Wiradjuri country. It takes in the Gwegul, the Widjabul, the Gadigal people. It takes in the Yorta people. It goes all the way down to the Kurnai people. Many sovereign nations were declared dispossessed in that moment. And 2 or 3 points to draw from that. Not only did Cook not have consent, how could he? Some of those nations are 200 or 300 kilometres inland. Not only did Cook breach the instruction only with consent, he didn't have consent, but the people of those sovereign nations did not even know it had happened, did not even know he had been. And furthermore, that declaration was spoken almost 2 decades before colonisation got underway with the First Fleet. In other words, and I need this to be heard loud and clear, the future of the Kararig people, the future of the Wiradjuri people, the future of the Yorta people, the future of the Gwegul people was sealed 18 years before colonisation got underway. We've got 26 million people in this country. How many out there know all this? They don't know this is the truth. I'm national chairperson of a national act of recognition. When we use the term recognition, it's got nothing to do with the Constitution. Aussie Cruise and I began this movement in 1997, long before Uluru was ever thought about. And we began truth-telling the recognition way 26 years ago. That's what we mean when we talk about recognition. Truth-telling the recognition way. Recognise the truth. All of that was wrongdoing number 2. And you will realise I'm drawing to a close. Cook and Banks returned to the United Kingdom, and they reported in response to questions by the British authorities. What's out there? And Cook was rather sidelined, it would seem. Our information is skimpy. Why wouldn't it be? But from what we can glean, Cook was seen to be the great, even magnificent explorer, perhaps the best maritime navigator that the world had ever seen. But it was to Banks, Joseph Banks, that the British authorities turned with most of their questioning. And they said to Banks, what's out there? And Banks said, Well, for a start, there's almost nobody there. And of the ones who are there, it's almost certain that they live around the coastal perimeter. It's inconceivable that they could exist inland in any great measure. There's very few people there. And the British authorities responded to that by saying, well then, if we were to send a truckload of convicts there and set up a penal colony on the coastline, would our people be subject to serious threat by the people who are there? I'm paraphrasing Banks, but it appears his answer went something like this. No problem, fellas. No problem at all. From what we saw, the people who are there will easily give up as much of the land that suits our purpose. Of the 26 million people we've got, how many know all this? That's why I'm dragging you through the detail. I'm taking you through a logical sequence of how colonisation unfolded, which reveals step by step the obvious conclusion, what happened to your people. Which brings me to wrongdoing number 3 and my grand finale. If you had been a Gweagal person living here then, 5 years went by, 10 years went by, 15 years went by. You could have been forgiven for thinking it had all blown over. What they didn't know was there was frantic activity going on in the United Kingdom. The first fleet was being prepared. And then the day came when the Gweagal people here looked just out there behind me, and the horizon was filled with the sail of tall ships. 11 ships, 11 tall ships, right up the entrance to Botany Bay. And on those 11 tall ships were accommodated 1,400 people. Some of those ships came in here. I'm talking the 20th of January, 1788. Governor Phillip did not like the look of the terrain. They sailed back out, and the whole lot of them pulled into what is now called Sydney Harbour. And there, 1,400 people stepped ashore, and before that day was over, the forest could be heard ringing with the sound of falling axes as the log cabins began to go up and up and up. And they set up shop, 1,400 people. With what consent? No consent. 1,400 people set up shop with no consent. The impact of that first moment of colonisation getting underway, almost 2 decades after the first declaration of taking possession, the first impact, basically, this is simplifying it, almost simplistically so. I can't get lost in the detail, there's not enough time. But the broad impact of that first wave of colonisation hit between the beach just here and the Blue Mountains over there. And maybe down as far as something like Nowra, and maybe up that way north as far as somewhere like Grafton or whatever. But the first impact hit the First Nations who belonged to country on that narrow strip of coastal land. And it was about 1791 or 2 that that first 30 acres of land was granted. Some of you will be familiar with this name. That young man's name was, wait for it, James Roos. How many of you have been up and down the James Roos Drive? So many times you can't remember. That's the location. And that's how that roadway got its name. I mentioned that impact between the sea and the mountains unfolded over 27 years. And then in 1815, former military man William Cox completed the roadway over those mountains, and the settlers swarmed across, and their eyes were filled with a vista they had never seen the like of before. Rolling, 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 sweeping grassy plains that went on forever. Most of them had never seen anything like it. Certainly not in the UK, not enough room. But here, their eyes were met with a vista that was a wonder to behold. Endless, rolling, grassy plains filled their eyes. And their eyes were filled with something else. Their eyes were filled with wealth. And the rest is history, right up until 2023. These deep issues unfolding in the chronological order that I've just laid out before you goes on. The deep human and spiritual issues, they're not political issues. They're not political issues at all. They're not financial issues. Money's got nothing to do with it. The real core driver of these issues are deeply human issues, and they are also deeply spiritual issues. We have to go there to understand this story. Those deep wrongdoings remain unresolved to this very day. Last October, after 25 years of endless effort, we succeeded in assembling 100 people here on site. They came from all over Australia, and they came intentionally. They knew what they were doing. And together, side by side, led by two prompters, leaders, 87 people stood and proclaimed in unison, all captured on camera. We have the video ready to go when we're ready. Those 87 people proclaimed, almost at the site where the British put their boots, we put our boots almost right where they put their boots in 1770. And there, in unison, proclaimed a declaration of recognition of our true history since colonisation. Almost 100 people from all over Australia. We're going to do it again, and next time we're aiming for a much, much larger crowd. What is our purpose? Eventually, believing that education is so much a key, because every time somebody new finds out the horrible truth of all of this, most decent people are utterly horrified. And we are setting out to teach 26 million people our true history in detail, because we, by faith, believe if we can all come to a deeper understanding of our true story, the next thing that's going to happen is we will end up with a deeper understanding of each other. And Aussie Cruise and I are working toward that day of truth, justice, healing, and harmony in this land, where all Australians, and the First Nations in particular, can live in quality of life, with no one left out. We hope to see you there at the next gathering. Thank you so much.
What you got to say to that? This old man came. Oh, sorry, Uncle. I call him this old man. That might get a boot for that.
More people are calling me that.
But he came all the way from Canberra. We didn't know what the outcome was today, and we thought the Australian people would want to know the truth about the true history. It's a shame that many Australians knew about this. It's a shame that many of our own people knew about this. But in order for there to be unity as a people, not of colour, not of race, not of religion, but as a people, to come together as one, you would think that they would have been here to listen to the truth. We still got a big journey ahead of us, because we got a battle, whether it be physical or spiritual, but we have a battle right now, and that's to unite as a people, regardless of colour. We just need the Australian people to recognise and understand that we are the original sovereign tribal people of this land. We don't want money. We don't care about money. We just want to be able to, with the recognition for Australians to stand with us, look after our country. It is our, how can I say it, our rightful inheritance. We have a responsibility as the custodians and the caretakers of this land, handed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. Should I go on? We've been here a long time. To look after the country, to look after everything for the next generation to come. Our children, their children, and so on and so on. But if you have a lot of greedy people that are standing there in power, that are only for, like Uncle said, their eyes, you know, what they seen was wealth. We just want to look after our country. We don't care about the government's money, because the government's money is what has corrupted my people. That has caused division. Now we got tribal rivalry through this yes and no. We don't care about their elections. We don't care about their voting or whatever it may be. What we care about is our land and where this government is taking this country. We don't know the full story, and we don't have the full details, and that's a concern to us. But all we know as the original tribal sovereign people of our country
We need to stand together for what we believe in, but we need to stand together for the next generations, for our country. I don't care about government. I don't serve government. I'm just going to let you know this straight out. If you don't know me, well, you do now, because I'll tell you what, I do not. They are not my masters. I do not serve them. I serve the Creator Spirit. I serve my ancestors. I serve Creator Mother and I serve Creator Father. They are not my masters. My elders in my community, they are my kings and my queen. They are my decision makers, are my elders. And when they tell us young mob, get out there and stand up, that's what we do. I listen to them. So don't expect me to listen to Halbo. I listen to my whole people. We have a job to do, and that's to look after country. You now all dwell upon our lands, and we have a responsibility as the first, well, the original sovereign tribal people of this country, to look after all the people who dwell upon our lands. Because we now share these lands with you, but as long as we have that garama, that we have that respect for each other, and that you recognize and you acknowledge that you are on tribal lands. And you know, that's all we ask, that garama. Brothers and sisters, you want to come fishing? You want to use the land? Come. Because my people were always about caring and sharing. That's all we want the people to do, to come back together, to unify. Because I want to say this, and I've said it many times before. The greatest strategic planners to divide and conquer is government. They know how to strategize, they know how to work your mind, they know how to do. But they are the greatest strategic planners. They know how to divide a people, they know how to, race, colour, religion, it doesn't matter. They know how to divide. And they're doing it again. They are the greatest strategic planners for divide and conquer. And are we going to allow this to continue? Are we going to wake up? Are we going to say enough is enough? This referendum is another strategic plan. Because look what it's done. Not only did you have to deal with COVID, you got a first hit of what it was like to be, as you could see, we had to deal with all this for 235 years. Through COVID, sorry Uncle, he's got to go soon, sorry. So through COVID, you've got a taste of what it was like to be locked down, segregated. What it was like to be, how can I say it? Crimes against humanity. There was a lot of things that was only a little taste of what my people have been through for 235 years. But if we don't unite as a people and now, because you know what makes us as First Nations people, why we get frustrated is because, do you know why they continue to do what they do to the Australian people and to my people is because we're complicit, we're compliant, and silence is acceptance. And if we don't unite as a people, and if we as, I love that, as we the people, because if you say we the people, then we are all one. But if this country doesn't wake up, we're heading down a direction that we don't want to go, a path that we don't want to go down. My people have looked after this country for thousands of years. Do you think we want to go down this path with the government that thinks they are the superior rulers over our country and over our lands and over our people? I think it's time that you all set your differences aside, because I don't care about your religion, I don't care about your colour, I don't care about your race. All I know is that we all live in this country together, and we got a government to stand against immunity. We have to let this government know, because this is where the government's up there and we're down here. The people should be up there and the government should be fucking nowhere. Sorry about the language. But see, the reason why they're doing what they're doing is because we, the people, are allowing it. We're accepting it. We should be flooding the internet. Brother said to me, we should be flooding the internet. Even though the king, he's still there. But we should be flooding the internet with all written letters and just flooding it like no tomorrow to show them that we as a people and of this country flood the internet with written letters. Just flood them, sign them, declarations, whatever they may be, but just flood the internet. Social media, just flood it, all letters to the king, to the government. All of those that think they're, well, can I say it in power? Yeah, they think. Yeah, well. But look, I after listening to, you know, my elders speak and my brother and my nephew and all of that, I didn't want to talk too much today because I wanted them to talk. But I can tell you now, it's a no from me. I don't even want to vote because I don't want to be complicit to their system. So this is why we're not going to get into that debate right now. You know, but so we need to start flooding social media with letters to the king, to all those, to the government, and just flood it like no tomorrow. Every politician, flood it. Yeah, flood it. How are they going to deny that? Just flood it. Yahweh. Yahweh. Put them on show. We gave an open invitation. This was a public invitation to the Prime Minister, to the people. You would think Australia would care about their country.
Yeah, we can ask them why did you knock back the invitation?
Asking for a declaration of war, or a declaration of ceding sovereignty, or a declaration of a treaty with any of them.
I don't want a treaty with them. I want a treaty with my people. I'd prefer to travel. I prefer, this is what the treaties are about, because these are tribal law. These are lawfully. And as you know, we got our tribal law enforcement here, bloody Shillingsworth. We don't have to recreate the wheel when we got to even have it. We even got a liberation army. We don't need to be creating the wheel when our people are already on the journey of self-determination. These treaties here that we've got, you've got the Widjabul, you got the Nayambul, we got many treaties. There's a Widjabul now. We've got 4 nations, 4 tribes within the Bundjalung nation that have treaty in, because they're binding between the tribes. So all the people that are dwelling upon our lands, not only our people, but all the non-originals dwelling upon our lands are protected under these treaties. So if we could actually establish, Uncle Michael, is there any way that we can actually establish once again, Aunty Glenda and all our elders, we need a national tribal council established once again to be self-determined. That our people can determine and run our own affairs without any interference from government. Put the government under your feet. Because the last time I looked, my elders were my government. And that's who I continue to stand under today, on the advice of my elders. Not this, can I say, petitious, belligerent, unlawful, occupy. Don't start me. But anyways, I won't take up much of your time, but I do want to do one thing. If I can have, and if I hold up a treaty, can I have someone, any of you, read the treaty today? Any volunteers? Come on. So this is the Widjabul Treaty. As you can see, we got tribal nation. I'd love for my Uncle Michael and all the elders that are here, to sign. So if I can have someone read the treaty. Would you like to read the treaty, sister? And around with. And these treaties are binding. These are legal. This is under tribal law and tribal jurisdiction. So,
Sister, you want to go in? Okay, so I apologise if I say it incorrectly or anything here. Not very good with my spelling. It says Widjabul, Tribal Nations Treaty with Love. We, the unsigned tribes, clans, families of our respective tribal nations, hereby acknowledge, recognise, respect and support the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of Widjabul, the rights of the Widjabul people to self-determination, the rights of the Widjabul people to protect, defend and conserve the country, their culture and lawful rights, agree to uphold diplomatic relations with Widjabul with respect and peace, that the rights of the people dwelling upon the Widjabul lands are protected under Widjabul tribal jurisdiction.
Amen to that.
Amen. Hey, thank you everyone for letting me speak and be able to have that opportunity. Thank you.
So as you can see, everyone is protected under these treaties. And this is what we talk about when we talk about tribal law, when we talk about tribal jurisdiction. We don't need a government. We can actually self-determine. We can actually run our own affairs in our own communities. You don't need government. We just need to do what we need to do as the people. We don't need to be at war with them, but we can actually establish and create our own governments and our own, our tribal councils outside. And that's where we'll be no longer complicit and compliant to them. Them, they, what? But that's all I've got to share. I didn't want to take everything from everybody else. But I come here in love and I come here in peace, and we just wanted to share today what the treaties are about. And it's about standing in our own power as the original tribal sovereign people of this country. Because government has done nothing. They've never helped our people. They've never done anything good for our people. But they have done nothing but stolen our lands and continue to take today. They continue to commit genocide, cultural genocide against us. And now they're causing tribal rivalries between us as a people, as a tribal people. And enough is enough in this country. You would honestly think, and I'm still dumbfounded, that many who needed to hear the truth and if they wanted to know the truth and they wanted to know where us no mob, what we have to say about this voice, the parliament, is that I don't support it. Because I respect what Uncle Michael's saying. I respect what my elders say. But until it's in writing about the truth of what this voice is really about, I don't trust anything they say, the government. They can say this and they can say that, and they can say that, our national sovereignty is not at threat. But I don't believe it, because everything they've said in the past up until now has been nothing but lies and trickery. So how can you trust them now to say, no, your national sovereignty is not under threat? I do not believe them. Tell me why I should believe them.
Tell me why I should believe government. Because they lie. Everything. And did you know that everything that has been created against my people or disempowered my people, like everything from the 1967 referendum up until now, even through them referendums, when they held a referendum back in 1967, not only should they have told the people that they were going to, amend the Constitution, they asked my people to be citizens in their own country. On every level. So you tell me why. And they struck out clauses, took away our rights, they disempowered my people. So if you think that the 1967 referendum was a good thing, then you look at everything else up until then, even till now. Who's pushing all these things, so-called, that Labor is our saviour? Everything Labor has done nothing but disempowered my people and stolen more and more land. You think the Liberals are the baddies? Well, you better think again, because Labor ain't no different. They just swapped seats, push different. They push the same agenda. They only swapped seats. And just, wait, 100%. That's what, look, no argument here. They only swap seats. They work for the same master, pulling the same strings. They just come at it in a different language. But they have the same agenda. You think that none of these no mob are not selected to be on this committee? Well, you better think again. Because they're all getting paid at the end of the day. A whole lot of them. The yes and the no. Liberal and Labor. So don't think none of them no mob are not on the list to be the... I'm going to dob them in. They got a new name. They're called the Elite Advisory Committee. Well, who died and made them more privileged than us? How dare they call themselves an Elite Advisory Committee as a grassroots? Just because the colour of their skin does not mean they represent us. I don't care what colour you are. If you're not at a grassroots level and you're not speaking truth and speaking up for the people, then you don't represent the people. I don't trust none of them. I don't care. If I could pick them up and throw them all, I would. But I don't trust anybody. I don't trust not politicians. I don't trust none of them. They've done nothing but lied, not only to the Australian people through this process, but to my people. I've no time of the day for politicians in this country. You all thought the Teals were good and the Teals were... You all thought the Teals were going to be saviours. Look who they work for. It was all them, disguised as the Teals. See, they come in all different directions, just a different name, but it's still them. But anyways, I don't trust any of them, and I never will. The only people I trust are my elders and my people. Not all. I can't say that, like only certain people. But I do love my people and I do love all Australians. I actually care about my people so much is the reason why I'm standing here today. I've gone out on a limb. I've been attacked every which way, standing up against this. I've been censored. I've been threatened. Why? I'm just a little girl, just a little woman from bush. But I got a big mouth. But I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want the people to make sure that
you know what's going on, you know, and that you know the truth, and that the government is being truthful. Because I tell you what, I don't want to be in their constitution, because I belong to this land. I don't belong to the British colony. I don't belong in a constitution. I belong to this land. This constitution has committed nothing but genocide against my people since colonial settlement. So why would we want to be in something that committed genocide? That's all I got to say. It's a no from me. Whether or not they're going to listen, I don't care, but I ain't finished. Because if they think they're going to if they're just going to push this yes through, regardless of what the people say, then they got another thing coming. Is it a threat? I don't know. You call it what you like. But I ain't going to stand while they do us all wrong. I'm not going to stand there and do nothing. Yahweh, you tell them. Yahweh. So we have a responsibility to do what's right in this country. A whole lot of us. But when you see a government that does not care about the people no more, that are out of touch, they don't care about you, they don't care about your family, and they don't care about your children. They serve a master, and trust me, it ain't creator. It ain't creator spirit. And I'll tell you now, I don't want a foreign. It's bad enough we're already, you know, under the British or whatever, but I'm not up for being, I don't like being called Little America. Do you?
United Nations.
So Australia, my people, we need to wake up and we need to unite. See the strategies. Don't be ignorant to it. Recognize it. But all I got to say is that I love my country. And I hope you feel the same. Oh, sorry, I got teary-eyed. That's why I was turning away from the shame job. I don't want to pull a Marcia Langton, ain't I? I got to get Dylan up here. I just want to, before anything. I got a deadly brother. And he's travelled down for this, and many conversations. But he's a good man. And he knows his system too. And he stands by my people. I just want to introduce you to Didge, they call him. And he's a deadly Didge player. But I want to introduce you to Dylan Wilson. I'll let him do the rest.
Good day, everyone. Thanks to Aunty Yvonne for welcoming us here on the Wiggle Nation. So I've never been here before. It's quite extraordinary to be here where the British came and made their claims originally. You know, he's right here in front of us. And And we're listening to some great truth telling today. The Reverend spoke before about some pretty important pieces of the puzzle along the way, and they spell out a very accurate description of what's going on here on this continent. And I want to talk about accountability, and I want to talk about the future, because I'm a father. I've got 2 kids, one on each side of this continent, and it's very important to me that they have a future and they don't have to take on this fight that we can solve right now, because I want them to have a free future, acknowledging the truth of where they are and the nations they stand on this giant ancient continent. So that's what I want to talk to you all about the fact that this is a continent, not a country. This is not a nation. This is a fiction that's assuming an authority and jurisdiction that it has no right to. And that all stems down to what the Reverend touched on with the fact that they were committing crimes when they came here. Now, when you commit a crime, there's no integrity in your action. So the Commonwealth making a claim here as a government is a null and void claim. It has no integrity. It has no right to be here on the land at all. And the only thing that holds it in place is the tacit consent of all the people. So that's us acquiescing to their authority and power. Like the police sit here over here now. They're getting a good education today. Good to see you, fellas. All right? They're going to learn the truth about their lack of jurisdiction, the same as everybody else who assumes it on this continent at this very time. They've got to do the same thing. So I want to see accountability. So what I'm doing is I'm going to help these nations, and we're going to go through the correct channels to make sure that the international criminal courts are aware that their own complicity is relevant in the fact that they're going to be charged with genocide, complicity in genocide, and that goes for the Crown, the Holy See, these police, everybody who's assuming jurisdiction or assuming to have the power to determine matters on this continent that they simply have no right to. This is blackfellow country, always has been, always will be. No matter where you stand on the continent, you are in a nation, and that nation has the right to self-determine over all of the matters on that land. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, or brindle. You live on one of those nations that start to learn. It's time for us to start to recognise that, and just stand in that truth and tell the truth. That's what it's about, telling the truth. We've been here for 235 years making assumptions. We've built a fake nation that commits tyranny against you all the time, and there is never any accountability for anybody because there is no obligation to any real law. So these thugs with guns are just imposing their authority at the behest of the Freemasons and those in control, those who think that they can take over the world with their New World Order. Well, that's how they do it, basically. So the New World Order has taken each nation, usurped its national sovereignty by putting it in debt. And I want to make a very clear statement here for the world to pay attention to. None of these original nations are in 1 cent of debt to anybody. So that frees all of us from our debt when we acknowledge and respect and be a part of these nations the proper way and let them self-determine the governance, and all of us as people can work together on how that best suits all of us with our free will and the will of the people working together. That's why I work on a concept called the People's Treaty, where we the people can treaty with these nations. It's not a legitimate international treaty, but it's a treaty. It's a promise from us to do the right thing and have the integrity to stand as residents on these nations and create a future together which is equitable for all of us. Always honouring that traditional law as in its place as the jurisdiction to make those decisions and determine the laws of civil society that we have to all live under. So that's a direction we can actually make a reality. That's very simple, and the people can do that right now. Now, this has been proven over and over again. I don't know how many times we've proven the fact that Australia just simply does not exist. So I don't call myself an Australian, okay, because that's a foreign concept to a nation that doesn't exist. So I believe in real nationhood. So I live in a Widjabul nation in the Bundjalung region of nations. There's a bit of confusion there over what's what and what's called what, but I live in Widjabul jargon. That's where I live. Mebbingarri is a woman there who has the right to the jurisdiction. Her mother is an elder there. And when they ask me to intervene or to help, I will, because that's my role and responsibility as a father, to make sure my children grow up in a world of integrity and not be forced to follow the tyrannous instructions of criminals in suits. Right, so we are grassroots, as grassroots as it can get, and we're here to make a difference. And yeah, you're all welcome to come along for the ride, because it's about all the people working together and being genuinely united in telling the truth and making the changes together, because no one else can do it for us. We have to step up and we have to stand down this government system. We have to denounce its assumptions to authority, and we have to stand in our power as truth tellers on this ancient continent and respect where we are first and foremost and start making changes. So look, I've come a long way to have a yarn, and I had nothing prepared. I sat with Uncle Louis the other day and he just said, yeah, don't go wing it off the cuff, So I'm winging it off the cuff as usual, and just telling it as it is, right? I'm just a free white fella living on a sovereign nation. No matter where I am, I'm walking on a sovereign nation's land, and I will never disrespect that. I will not break their law, and I will always honour and respect where I am. Okay, and that's such a simple thing to do for all of us white Australians, is just to respect where we are and tell the truth. You know, let's stop pretending and allowing a tyrannous government to make these decisions and then stand there whinging at it like we can change it from within the bounds of a fictional constitution. Now that constitution is a fraud. It was made in 1900. It has the title whereas, and the word whereas means in contrast to or contrary to the fact that. So if you read that sentence on the preamble, it says in contrast to or contrary to the fact that we the people rely humbly on the blessings of Almighty God to federate this nation. Right? Now, by saying that, they say there, in contrast to the blessings of Almighty God. And it was the Church of England and God's law that they brought here under the common law. And they are in contrast to that knowingly committing genocide, because genocide is not sanctioned under God's law anywhere on this planet. So that is the reason it says whereas and it doesn't say we, because it's a fake nation and only us acquiescing, and our tacit consent holds that in place. So I remain free to tell the truth wherever I am, and I will be for the rest of my life, and I will not be letting my children take this battle on. Okay, so that's where I stand, and I hope you can all find it in your hearts. All the people across this continent, say no to this goddamn voice. It does not have a right to even be determined by this fictional system. So it's a no whether you vote, or it's just a no to the outcome, because it is not legitimate enough to make a determination either way. All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for being here, being patient through this day. It's a beautiful day to be here talking, and I'd love to see some more energy towards truth-telling and getting this done as the people. So thank you very much for your time.
You mob probably all know this young tribal Murrawari man, Buddy Shillingsworth. So Spirit has brought us here together today, and it was good to see my brother again. And got a lot of fire in his belly. You better watch out, you mob. But I'm gonna let him speak now.
All right, thanks. I wasn't expecting to talk today, but when I first met this one and Brother Luke was on social media, and she come out and did a bit of work at it in Gonia, so on Budjalung Murrawari country. That's where I come from, up near Burke and Gonia, between Cunnamulla. We went through a bit of trouble over this pandemic period, and my people up there were getting fines left, right and centre. And look, we know that when additional powers are given, fraudulent, fictitious powers are given, our people, the original people of the land, are the ones that are on the receiving end of that. And the reason why is because sometimes we don't stand up. The reason why a lot of our people don't stand up is because, as I said, we're always on the receiving end of what goes on in this fraudulent, fictitious corporation that has never been given permission to establish their trade and their commerce upon First Nations lands. And so it's a privilege to be here today on the area where they actually came and where they established or placed their trademark, their flag, upon First Nations lands. When I went to Canberra with this mob, nations, we sat down and we said, what do we need to do in order for us to get out of that mindset of poor bugger me, or the expectation for the very corporation that has got us dispossessed, oppressed and genocide to change the trajectory of where we're going. We said, well, we need to maintain our dialogue as First Nations people. And that dialogue is for us to do what we've already done, which is charge the Commonwealth with crimes against humanity and give the Australian corporation an eviction notice. We've done that. I don't care whether people think that is right or whether it's wrong, whether it's radical, whether it's not, whether it's violent, whether it's not. We know that that is within our right to be able to do. I don't care whether I'm locked away for 2 lifetimes. I've got 4 children that'll carry on my legacy. The truth, the fact. That's just from a First Nations perspective, but from a non-Indigenous perspective, the expectation now is to stop upholding the fraud and the fiction. The fraud and the fiction is the very establishment that was created by the coming together of even the visitors of the British colonies back in 1901, when the very constitution that they are sending the illusion that the voice of First Nations people are going to be enshrined within. It's fraud, it's fiction. What we need to do is to stop listening to what they have to say. We have to stop thinking that because they put a bit of ink on a dead piece of tree parchment, that it is real, that we have to abide by it. There's 25 million people that live across this continent. The power is if those 25 or majority of those 25 million people come together, speak the one message, move together through peace, through harmony, through respect. Education, yes. Acquiring that knowledge. Acquiring that knowledge has to be receptive, which means people have to be ready to receive that. Upholding a lie is hard. Upholding a lie has seen my people dispossessed, oppressed and genocided. For those that think we're getting somewhere within this construct, stop kidding yourself. More of our children, both black and white, are being taken. They're being kidnapped and trafficked through the system. I don't care whether you call them a child protection system. I don't care whether you give it the word legal. It doesn't make it right. Those children belong to those families. I don't say jail or prison anymore. I say barbaric solitary confinement, because that's what it is. I don't care whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're brindle. It is against anybody's human right to put them in barbaric solitary confinement. It is our responsibility, every single one of us, to teach our future generations that, to keep reinforcing within our own thinking. And I admit sometimes I lag in maintaining that dialogue of truth. But as Brother Didge said earlier, as Uncle Michael said earlier, Sister Mebbingarri, Brother Luke, all the speakers here today are reinforcing the truth. I don't want to sound tokenistic, but when we walk away from here today, let's think about what we can do as an individual, what we can do as a family, what we can do as a community, as a nation, to maintain our dialogue of truth-telling, to uphold the peace, the respect amongst one another. I would like to say to non-Indigenous people today, or even my First Nations brothers and sisters, that we need to acknowledge that the system is not us. You are not the system. Start separating yourself from the corporation, because the more, like Uncle Michael said, the more we acquiesce, which means we sit down, we do nothing, we say nothing. It is a gesture of enabling them to do what they do to us. We have to stand up, call it out for what it is, in whichever way that looks. Fear is the way we are being controlled. Do not fear. The moment we fear is when we're already consumed and imprisoned the way they want us to be. That's how they control us. So again, when we go away from here today, let's think about what we can do from an individual, community, and nation level so that we can move to that next step. Nothing has moved until now, I admit. I'm not going to stand here and I'm not going to be tokenistic, and I'm not going to sugarcoat the reality of what's going on out there. Every single day our people are being incarcerated, both black and white. Our children have been kidnapped and trafficked. We need to stop that. Don't turn a blind eye, because the moment we turn a blind eye, the moment they gain traction. Us as First Nation sovereign people upon this land standing within our jurisdiction, our power and our authority, we wait until this construct give us an inch, we run a mile. Everybody needs to do that. We're looking for change. It's not going to come from a hand-selected few. We know this. It's going to come from the majority. Yes. So thanks very much. It's an honour to be out here today, acknowledging the traditional custodians and just acknowledging how much these mob have been through, how much blood has been stained upon this very land that we gather here today. It's sad. Look, vice versa, if you're conflicted within your thinking, if this happened in a place like England, I would be disgraced. I would want change. I would want unity. So vice versa, let's walk in this truth, let's walk in this unity together. Yes, it is a challenge, but hey, be excited for it. Don't see it as a detriment or too much work. It's nothing that we can't fix or nothing we can't change. So thanks very much.
I'm going to tell you a little story. You want to hold that out? Ready? Can you see the difference? Tell me what you see. This is the original. This flag right here is 50-something years old. There was 2 flags, mate. We had an old man that passed away. We ended up with this. I kept on saying to the Creator, why have I ended up with this flag? What's it all about? This flag is not incorporated. It's not owned by the Commonwealth. This is actually the original tribal sovereign flag, and it's free. When Harold Thomas took over from old Mr. Brown, they shrunk the sun. It became corrupted and it became about money. But look what we hold today, and this is the flag that we stand under as the original tribal sovereign people. It's free. Nobody owns it. So they talk about free the flag. They talk about a flag that is now owned by the Commonwealth. How is it free? He's the true flag. The big sun. The original sovereign tribal flag. You're looking at it. This flag is 50 years old. 52. It's right before you. I just wanted to share that with you. That this flag that we're wearing, I got growled, mind you, from South Australia. Why you got that little sun on you? It's like, oh, because I can't find a shirt with a big one. You know. But this is the true, the original. So when you're looking at the corporate, the $20 million flag, we call it the $20 million flag. Right? How much did they get paid? $20 million? We'll call it the $20 million flag. Oh, I didn't know that bit. But anyways, as you know, this flag is now owned by the Commonwealth. I'm ashamed of wearing this shirt. I hope everybody see this. But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to let you know that we have an original with the big sun. So if you want to start printing anything, how about we take it back to the original when we talk about truth telling? And nobody owns this. With the original tribal sovereigns to the land. This is the flag that should be flying rightfully in this country. And no man owns it.
was created by our old people when they first stood up for land rights. They established the 10 Embassy. There was a black power movement going on in this country. And these were the first flags made for our people when they introduced our First Nations flag. So I just wanted to share that with you. How privileged we are just to have this flag before us and not in the hands of the corrupt. So we don't want this flag corrupted. We want it to stay what it is and true. So I just wanted to share with you today when we talk about truth telling. How beautiful is this? Is the real flag. Anyways, I just wanted to share that. Do you know what the colours represent? Does any of you know what the colours represent in this flag? Come on. Yeah, tell me. Yellow. What does the yellow stand for? No, you're not allowed to tell him. You're cheating now. What is it? Yeah, wait, the yellow? What does the yellow stand for? Yeah, this one. That big circle, what does it stand for? You know? Because that's the sun. That's the big sun. In my language you call it Yelgan. His grandfather. This here, the black is our people. The yellow is the sun. And the red is the land, but also bloodshed. And that's what the colours look like. Oh, look behind you and look what's flying over the top of us. Because we're telling the truth. Yahweh. Okay. We want to thank you all for coming today, and nephew. We're going to get these men to do a little. You want to do? Yahweh. So, anyways, there's a little truth telling about the flag. How about that? So, when you want to do a flag or you want to draw, it's the big flag. It's the big sun.